Hello and welcome to the Future Skills Show, brought to you by Truro and Penwith College and the Future Skills Institute. My name is Russell Cosway and I'm hosting a discussion with industry professionals, educators and students on the emerging skills in the businesses and what's needed from education. We hope to dispel some myths, define some challenges ahead and do some crystal ball gazing. Now in this episode we're talking about renewables. Renewable energy has been around for over 2,000 years, ever since the first waterwheel. 1876 saw the first solar cell, 1927 the first commercial wind, and in 1935 the Hoover Dam delivered hydroelectric power for the first time. However, it's taken fossil fuel and climate crisis to elevate renewables into a key industry for the future. So to generate some conversation with me today, I have James Standley, the Chief Operating Officer of the Kenza Group, Kate Dibble, Business Development Consultant for Benneman, and Nick Tillier, Automotive and Engineering Programme Lead in Truro and Penwith College. Welcome all to the Future Skills Show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to kick off to define renewables. And perhaps we'll go around the table so you get the short straw there, James. How would you define renewables to somebody who's looking at their career choices at this point in time? And tell us a little bit about Kenza.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me today. It's an enormously broad question there.
Of course.
What is renewables? So renewable energy, using something that's renewable.
Is it a one-time use? Yes.
Is it a one-time use? What's the payback? What's the carbon footprint? And how all that works? In terms of careers, there's an enormous breadth there. When it talks about the green economy, and that I think that will touch almost every single job that exists moving forwards as we look to decarbonise our society and move to net zero. So pretty much everything and anything I think sits.
I suppose renewables in the context of Kenza then.
Okay, so Kenza heat pumps, we manufacture ground source and network heat pumps and install them and finance them from our base in Chasewater.
And just to explain what ground source and what is your network source is, that'd be great.
So heat pumps using renewable energy to heat homes and dwellings, and the ground source element of that is using energy from the ground, the sun's energy stored in the ground to in a device that is basically a fridge.
An inverted fridge.
An inverted fridge, yep. The network heat pump concept is a similar idea, but we're promoting the introduction of infrastructure into the ground. So your ground array is provided as infrastructure in the same way that the gas grid has been. Down a street, and then when your gas boiler or your oil boiler gets to the end of its life, then you've got your infrastructure in the street to hook up to, and that is what we see as the low carbon, low cost route to decarbonising our heating.
Okay, well we'll come back to that. Brilliant. Perhaps talk to Kate about Benneman and how would you define renewables in this horrendous question that I've given you?
Thank you. I guess renewables, the basic definition I guess would be, in terms of energy, fuel that comes from a sustainable, non-finite source. So when we apply that to Benneman, we also like to factor in the circular economy a bit. So what we do at Benneman is we cover slurry lagoons to capture the cow poo gas that comes off. So we capture that gas, it's about 60% methane, so we capture that and we upgrade it. And we can then use that on the farm as a fuel for tractors. So we're like closing the loop there. And then you've also got the cow poo element of it. So we put that in a lagoon and that comes out as a digestate, but it's full of nutrients. So again, those nutrients can go back onto the land. So we've closed the loop on both those things. So that for us at Benneman is really what Renewables is all about, is keeping that loop going and keeping it sustainable with no finite resources having to go into that. We just keep it going.
Amazing. Never thought I'd be on a show talking about cow poo. Renewables from an education, what's the college's stance and what it's doing in renewables?
Well, it's a hot topic at the moment, isn't it? It's not going anywhere, so it's a big part of the future for engineering. And for engineering is a problem-solving activity, and we've got a huge problem. And I think some really innovative ways of solving that. But it's going to be from a mix. There isn't one answer. It's the same as transport and electric vehicles and hybrids and hydrogen.
Yeah.
There's no one single answer here. It has to be a blend of technologies. And I think some of the most exciting aspects are, capturing methane. Not only are we using that energy then to power something, but we're removing that from the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. It's a net gain everywhere. So there's some amazing things going on. And I think with young people, there's a lot of interest. There was a period 15, 20 years ago where renewables are kind of like, who's really interested in that? No one had, really any energy towards, working towards renewables. It wasn't at the forefront of anyone's, prospects when it came to careers. I think that's changed completely now. Lots of students are interested in renewables, and lots of engineering problems that we run as group exercises are based on aspects to do with the environment and renewables. We've gone from talking about fossil fuel transport systems when we're doing a project through to electric autonomous vehicles, and that's renewables have brought into that. Challenges over beach cleaning and plastic pollution are now a regular feature of projects in student work. So everything's sort of aiming towards a real interest in renewables. So from an education background, and perspective, that's something we've got to foster, help and promote.
And getting from that and the comments there is this isn't about as you say, one technology, one thing. This is kind of a blend of a vast number of skills. What kind of skills are there in your business?
Firstly, absolutely agree. It's very much a blend. If there was a silver bullet, we'd done it already. Yes. So it is very much going to be a whole set of things. In terms of skills in the business, we're a manufacturing business in Cornwall, and so there are an awful lot of traditional manufacturing skills in terms of planning, purchasing, the roles on the shop floor as well, that are very much in demand for what we do.
As well, yeah.
The much bigger area for skills is with the installers, the purchasers of our product. So those who install and fit gas and oil boilers at the moment, in the future aren't going to be able to install gas and oil boilers. They're going to have to install something different. So there's a skills change that we're going to have to see there to be able to install different low carbon technologies, whatever they might be.
And what kind of skills? Similar question there in Veneman.
Yeah, so we're quite different in a way because we're still sort of on the cusp of growing. Really, we started off as a very high tech, innovative company, and it was our high tech patented technology that kicked us off. So our workforce to date has largely consisted of scientists and engineers, physicists, people who have come from university mainly. And as we grow, obviously, we're starting to build in greater quantity. All of our bits of kit. So then we need to start bringing in the manufacturing skills as well. But also, interestingly, from a technical point of view, we actually need to be really quite clever about some of the commercials as well. Because we're talking about the logistics of moving gas from a one-point source on a farm to potentially multiple customers. And then, how do you do the commercials of that? Who pays for the gas? Who owns the gas? How are you going to manage all of that? How do you account for the carbon? So we start to bring in all those commercial skills now, which are becoming more and more important to us as we grow. So we're seeing it change quite a bit as we get larger.
And you mentioned a young, obviously the college is changing and it serves predominantly the younger student, let's say. And they're becoming more socially aware of the need to be using renewables. Are we? And it's a question to everybody really. Are we seeing perhaps the more seasoned individual like myself changing our points of view and perhaps moving to perhaps change into a more sustainable industry?
I think there's no question. Yeah, it is. It's going to be the next one of the next revolutions in the UK really and across the world, where renewables are now the default rather than the alternative. And I think that's young people are seeing a big change in that. I think, and we spoke recently the other day about how we're as a species not particularly good at dealing with change. I'd invite anyone to explain the evolutionary advantage of not being prepared to change. I mean, it's a strange thing. So we are. It's about not only education for young people, but it's also making sure they've got the skills going forward. But also we get some rid of the media's great at sustaining myths and bad news stories and things, and the fears of. And I think that's another aspect we need to help people understand. And part of that will be retraining for people with existing trades, such as plumbers and electricians, who will be then installing and dealing with, because it's coming. There's no question this is going to happen. It's how can we best be ready for it? That's the key.
Can I just add to that? I was just thinking before I got here. It used to be the case that you'd leave school or university and you go into a company, you kind of get assimilated to that company culture. But now I think there's a huge opportunity for young people to go in and change the company culture, because these companies have to change. We have climate emergency. If they don't change and adapt, they're going to die. And I just feel like young people have got the best opportunity to go in and do that and really push. And we need to give them confidence, I think, to be able to do that. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. And are we seeing a shift in opinions that has people moving towards heat source?
Yes, very much so. There's thousands and thousands of companies within the UK who a lot of them are very small companies, installing fossil fuel systems, and the call for training, the call for learning about these new things is enormous. And as you mentioned, Nick, the media is very good at increasing the fear and creating the worry and I don't want to change. When actually the skills gap, such as it is, I think is probably a lot smaller than the media perhaps would suggest that it is. And so, yes, while there might be a skills gap, it is a little smaller than those who don't want the change, who are resisting it, might indicate. So.
Yeah, perhaps it takes millions of years to change, but we haven't really got that that luxury to fall back on evolution to help us do this. I mean, that's an interesting, these are industries set up around the fact not just set up around it, it's the sensible use of our resources, the perpetual use of resources instead of the one-time use of resources, which is valued here. Are people starting to move because they're fearing for the future?
I think to a certain extent, yes. I think people are more interested in this because they see that there is an impending doom, but I don't think everybody sees it that way. And I think more closer to home and in the short term, things like energy prices going up, volatility in the energy price market is a real big concern for industry.
Yes.
So we're often finding in our business that it's not necessarily the fact that we can offer a cheaper fuel to maybe a traditional diesel, it's the fact that we can fix that price. Because the farmer knows how much methane they're producing and they can fix that price for 5, 10, 20 years. And then the customer knows that they're getting their gas from that one person and it's fixed for 5, 10, 20 years. So both companies can really benefit from that. And really, they've got that that sort of long-term assurance that they can go forward with their businesses. And I think that we're seeing is almost more important than anything at the moment, giving people security.
Interesting. So what kind of skills do you look, if you're looking for somebody to employ in your business, what do you look for in an individual? Perhaps you'd like to...
Kenza employs a huge varied, we have people on the shop floor who need to be particularly skilled at that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the people who've come from degrees and doctorates who are helping design the next generation of heat pump, as well as those who are doing the financial modelling for how we all pay for this thing. So there is a huge variety. We very much encourage those who have an interest in the climate and are interested in us being part of the solution, which is what we think we are. So that there is that. But in terms of what skills, there's such a huge depth there that it's difficult to pin down.
I think that this is probably part of the point of the show, is that the fact that although this is an industry, you could see it as a high-tech industry, you could see it as an installer's industry, but it's that and much more. And of course, you've always got those common skills, as you mentioned, warehousing and procurement and finance and HR are all good, strong skills that every business needs. But obviously, people are kind of interested in is what they can get out from what they'd be educated to do, specifically targeted at this industry. What about Benjamin in the case of what skills you look for?
Yeah.
Accepting that you have got the broad issue as well.
Yeah, no, we do. I mean, very similarly, we've primarily recruited sort of technical people, generally graduates. We haven't to date, for example, taken on an apprentice, but it's something we might do in the future. And then we've also got roles on sort of more of the manufacturing side and commercially. But I think another thing that's going to become more important for us as we grow is being able to find the skills we need in the quantities we need them. So, for example, we're just starting to really ramp up our manufacturing. Now, we have to ask ourselves, well, do we want to bring that in-house and potentially struggle to find people locally who can do those roles, or do we want to outsource this to another company, maybe up country? And this will all affect how we run the business and how we grow. And it is a serious question, I think, at the moment, because we do struggle a little in some of those roles, particularly down here. So I don't know if you find the same thing. But.
Yes, we are having the same sort of challenge at the moment. We have struggled to hire.
Yeah.
At the moment, I think that's a countrywide situation. I don't think it would make any difference if we were anywhere else in the country. Moving forwards, yes, if we are going to do the sorts of heat pump manufacturing levels that the government is suggesting, 600,000 by 2028 from what's currently 40,000. That's going to need manufacturing of an order of magnitude more than we're currently doing. Is this the right place to do it? Where do we sit ourselves? How does that work? It is part of the ongoing discussion.
Perhaps we'll come back to that in a second, Nick.
Yeah, there's a risk there, isn't there? There's a real risk. If we don't understand what companies need and want in the way of current and future work skills, then we're in trouble. And it's our job, it's our function as a college to prepare people for those jobs. So understanding that's really important. Every company is going to go from a survival aspect. How do we get this job done? How do we make sure that this functions? How does it? Where do we get these raw materials or these components from? If there's a risk that there isn't the supply, either of skills or components or whatever, you'll find an alternative. That's just the way of things. So I think we've got to be very honest with ourselves and say, okay, what are we doing now? Do we understand what the needs are in the future? How do we fix that? And then we come back to how do we encourage people to want to go and work in that sort of field? And I think that's an easier job to do these days than anything else. We're midway through our construction of a new training centre in Bodmin, the Ottery building, which is a STEM and healthcare centre. And so, we've talked with a lot of employers. We're regularly speaking to employers about skills, about what we think might happen. And there is a bit of a crystal ball sort of blue sky sort of gazing on this, because you can't get it right all the time. You have to get it as close as you can. But I think we're confident that we're putting in aspects such as composite manufacturing. We're looking at brazing skills and assembly, things that will impact directly on companies that currently aren't serviced in this area and throughout Cornwall with certain skills in certain areas. And we can't do everything. We can't do everything for everyone. It can't be really specific and really niche. But we can give businesses an opportunity to hire people with good grounding skills, with skills that are relevant for them and their growth.
And how do businesses engage with the college? How would you like them to engage with?
I think we do. I think we do a very good job with that as it is. There's always room for improvement, clearly, but it's from a perspective that we work with the Cornwall Manufacturing Group, who feed back to us about trends, issues, problems that they're picking up on. But it's that personal relationship with companies as well. And I've recently been out to Kensington quite recently to understand what those needs are. We visit a large number of companies in Cornwall. To really try and get on the ground, pick up what the actual issues are from the people who are doing the jobs, and the people who are looking for those people to employ. There's no one way of doing it. Going out, understanding, using the trade groups, but also inviting companies in to come and talk about the problems they're facing, and they're part of the solution as well. We need to make sure that not only have we got the right skills in the right place and the right volume, but we've got to have confidence that there are jobs at the end of it for those people. The last thing we want is to train a whole generation of people for a job that then doesn't exist. And those transferable skills become really important. But I think, county-wide, the similar skills are needed across the board, and there is a shortage of people who are interested or want to do that, either because they're not aware that it's there, or they haven't been encouraged, or simply that they've not been shown that as a possibility. They could work in renewables or something similar.
Yeah, so they're not interested or don't know they could
They're
be interested.
not aware of it. Generally, is a lack of awareness of what the opportunities are, and we come back to the whole. We need to do more with schools, and schools have a tough job. Schools have got a really hard job of doing what they do already. So loading more and expectations of, well, you need to tell them about all this and all that. And they need help to do that. So back to the careers advisors as well. But I think being very honest is the most important thing. What do you do well? What don't you do well? Be honest about it. We've all failed. We've all had products that have failed, systems that have failed, initiatives that have failed. Learn from it, move forward. And I think that conversation is really important.
Is it possible that this type of industry, again, probably viewed as a high tech or an emerging, but we know probably isn't, it's using, probably not so much for getting energy out of poo, but is it a communication issue that we haven't got that message across, so that these type of opportunities are available in your businesses? Is that what we're suffering?
I think it could be. I mean, mainly because you just focus on your business, don't you? You're quite insular looking, and it's not until you come to recruit that you think, oh, probably should have started this a year ago. I think business, it just does that. You're kind of head down and in it, and so you lose sight of the bigger picture, and perhaps we're not going out as much as we should to let people know about what we're doing and what opportunities there will be now and in the future.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. There is a communication issue. Some of that's central government.
Okay.
And a report was released last week on decarbonising heating homes by the one of the select committees that highlighted that as a direct challenge and encouraged government to provide more certainty moving forwards on what the pathway was, so that those who are currently doing X understand that that's going to work for a period and then it's going to stop. And so starting that provides that impetus and that time for a conversion to happen that's sensible. Yeah.
So I mean, you mentioned figures there which suggest you got like a 3,000 to 5,000 potential growth market in the heat pump.
Yep.
And you mentioning the desire to move into manufacturing. Is it possible to do that in Cornwall with the local resource? Do we need to just grow more home resources, or do we need to, are we just not in the right place? I know that's a bit controversial.
No. For me, I don't think it matters. Other than we are in the local market. So most of our competition is Chinese or is Scandinavian. Yeah. So you have reduced the carbon footprint of the thing we make by making it in the UK.
Yes.
And then actually, whether it's made in Cornwall or Scotland or Sheffield doesn't make that much of a difference.
Okay.
As long as the infrastructure and the people are there. But as I said earlier, for me, the people aren't there nationwide rather than just locally. So, and we have had and continue to have some large manufacturing businesses in this part of the world. So and growing. So.
Yeah, I'd largely agree. I think we could do it here. I'm just thinking of some of the challenges we may have. Lagoons are large, and we create liners for very large lagoons. That means you need a very large shed to build the liner in. That on its own might be a barrier to us building much in Cornwall, just as an example. But I think we prefer to have local manufacturing because, again, you mentioned the carbon footprint. If we're putting covers on farms in Cornwall, we should make the covers in Cornwall. Ideally, that would be brilliant. But yeah. I think
the UK at worst.
Yeah.
We
can do it.
I mean, it's just that question is how could we make Cornwall a mass manufacturer, or should we, I suppose, or should we be the niche quality manufacturer engineering area? I don't know. Is Cornwall a leader in renewables, would you say?
I think we're leading in some areas.
Okay.
We have some world-leading companies.
I suppose it was a hell of a question to companies. Of course, we're leading.
And so, in that, we've got, probably some of the largest employers nationally for renewables.
Okay.
Here today, that that suggests we're leading in some things. Clearly, we've got in the offshore wind opportunities. There's some significant opportunities for us to be leading in that regard moving forwards as well. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is unique, or?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I think that Cornwall has really good ambition. Actually, we have a lot of natural resource that we can really tap into. You know, wind, wave, solar, and we've exploited a lot of that. Perhaps not always with Cornish companies, but then what do you want Cornish companies, or do you want employment in Cornwall? And so you have to balance the two. But I do think that Cornwall Council especially has some really good ambitions to be a leader in the climate emergency, you know, in what we can do towards climate emergency. So I'm quite hopeful that it will push the renewables agenda in Cornwall a lot harder.
Is that what you're seeing in education as well? Is that renewables has got there's a greater interest growing in it?
Yeah, I think every qualification we run has got an element of sustainability in it, and you know that leads straight back to renewables. You know, I think going forward we'll see more and more modules within sustainability and renewable technology. I think that's definitely going to happen. And if they're not in the qualifications, that will be a conversation we'll have as part of the lessons that we deliver to understand, help people to understand what goes on. I think from a personal point of view, Cornwall is a leader. We're an early adopter of a lot of technology. We're an early adopter of wind farms. We're an early adopter of solar. There's an awful lot in the county already. We've got some of the highest winds and most sustainable winds in Europe and across the UK. What we need is support to cultivate that. Excuse the pun, but it is. There are some real there's some real opportunities for us here. We've got some real challenges as well. I think. Just thinking about transport and electric vehicles, there are some real challenges there for how where does that energy come from? And I think we got part of the solution. Is already there, and I think there's more to do. But it's we got some great natural assets in Cornwall, and I think part of that are the people. I think it's just making sure they've got the skills and the knowledge they need to be able to help manufacturers move forward. But again, there's so many factors in there. Looking at where are we going to put these things? We need to decide. If we want to do this, we want these skills, we want these jobs. Then let's have a look at planning law and ease that, so we can have spaces for companies to grow. There are so many examples in Cornwall where we are world leaders in engineering and manufacturing, literally. And we don't. And again, we just don't shout about it enough. We don't celebrate it enough. It should sell itself. There shouldn't be any need to say, look, look at what we do. It's amazing. It should be common knowledge. And I think we need to do more on that to make sure that people are aware of what is actually going on. So, yeah, absolutely. In qualifications, certainly, and if it's not in there, then we'll put it in there as teachers. So, again, it's that working with employers to make sure that students understand.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned or hinted towards the infrastructure issues that face perhaps the electrical distribution of electric vehicles and things like that. You mentioned, James, the introduction of network solutions. Can you just explain a little bit more about what that is and how that works? Are you talking about retrofitting existing neighbourhoods with stuff, or are you talking about new builds where they have this network? Just build up on that
sure.
one a bit.
Yeah. So we are doing networked heat pumps at new builds right now, in the hundreds or thousands type of volume, and so we'll go along, put the ground array infrastructure in, then they'll build a house, and then the heat pumps go.
So what's a ground array, just for those uninitiated individuals?
Yes. Pipes in the ground, usually drilled with a borehole going down between 200 and 400 metres.
Oh, quite a way.
But not deep geothermal depths.
Okay.
Still accessing the sun's energy rather than the Earth's core.
Okay, so it's the general heating of the Earth.
Yes, yeah.
And that brings the temperature of the water up in those
and
pipes.
what that does is it then acts as a battery, essentially, so that the temperature of the ground is the same in the middle of the summer, broadly, as in the middle of the winter.
Oh, okay.
So when you need your heating system to work in the middle of the winter, you're taking it from a source that hasn't dropped in temperature. That makes it more efficient.
Yes.
It also means it doesn't matter when you run your heat pump, whether it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon.
Right.
Which it would if it was an air source heat pump.
Yep.
Colder in the middle of the night.
Yes, yes.
And all of those things make it more flexible so that we're more able to be warm and run our heat pumps when it's windy.
Right.
So we need to separate those things so that we're able to use the renewable energy when it's being created and still be warm when we want to be warm in our homes.
Yeah. So the concept of the network, large array, serving multiple heat pumps on new builds.
Yes.
Is this
and then you take that and move it to retrofit, and that is something that we're doing. We're piloting with a Heat the Streets project, doing private retrofit with that system in Stithians, and that's going in over the next 12 months.
Brilliant. And what are the barriers to that? Is planning a barrier?
Planning is a bit of a barrier, yes, because we're digging up the roads in exactly the same way as the gas and the water utilities can, but we don't have utility powers, so we can't do that yet.
No.
So we've got to apply for planning. And there's a financial barrier. That ground array infrastructure costs some money.
Yeah.
It does mean you then don't need to build power stations.
Okay.
So
that's a good plus, I would say. Yeah.
But we don't yet have the regulatory system that values that power station you haven't had to build.
Okay. All right. That's so the scope of work required to deliver that is vast. You've got construction. You've got roadwork, infrastructure introduction.
But the model that we're putting in place very much mimics the gas infrastructure.
Okay.
So you take those skills problems and put them into already existing buckets.
So that's interesting. So, and of course, we got the new build regulations that will prohibit the introduction of a gas boiler from 2025.
That's their plan.
That's the plan. Whether they actually nail it on the head.
Yep.
But so essentially, the options then are go whole electric heating.
Yes.
Which is eye-watering, I expect at the moment, or to the heat source pump. Heat pump.
Yes.
I keep on buying sources in all at the moment. Okay, so huge opportunities in this area.
Absolutely.
But you don't have to be a scientist to do it.
Nope.
Okay, sounds good. And you've got huge installations going on, but you actually need manufacturing for liners and such like.
Yeah.
Brilliant. How do you step up to a challenge like that in education?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, some of them are existing skills, some of them are skills that need to be modified, some are skills that are yet to be developed, and I think it's going to be again a blended approach. If we look at some of the challenges we got there from a design aspect, from manufacturing, we kind of got those covered. It really does depend on the exact activity of the employer as how ready young people and students are. There are some new qualifications that we're looking at that may be a partial solution, but that involves a huge commitment from the employers as well. So T-levels, for example. So T-levels will become the replacement for a lot of level 3 qualifications at the moment, and they're different. They're different in the respect they cover a greater amount of topics to less depth. So you understand, you learn a lot more to a very shallow depth. It gives you more exposure in that respect. But it will be very focused on particular routes. So the most applicable to this would be installation, maintenance and repair.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and that does fit. The content's a very close fit to what's needed. But the two barriers to that, very few students coming out of school have chosen at that point to be a maintenance and installation engineer. They've got no basis to make that decision on. So that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
There may be ways of countering that, better education about careers, pathways and so on. That would be helpful. But I still think it's difficult to pigeonhole your future skills at that age, considering you've got to your 19 to make those choices before it starts costing you money to change that. So I think that's one aspect, is that the T-levels are very narrow. And at the moment we're looking at how we can help to shape those to be better, more fit for purpose. In addition to that, we've got the challenge of work placement on T-levels. So it's around 315 hours of work placement on a T-level. That means a company has to commit to that person, and it can only be one of two companies maximum, for around 45 days of work experience. Now that's, okay, you've got a small cohort of 5-6 students, not a problem. We could probably find enough renewables companies in Cornwall that would be able to service that. But when you're talking about cohorts of 30, 40, and then you're talking about not just one college, you've now got a situation where you've got a very large number of students who all want and deserve a great experience on work placement, and industry have got to give up time, people, resource to be able to do that. Perhaps that's a good thing. Perhaps that's what we need is more input from industry, but there is a burden there on industry that are trying to grow and compete. So it's really hard. It's a tough call because we all need the people, we need those skills, but there has to be a cost to everyone to get to that point.
Yeah. Is that something you think the Benham might, is that something you might step up to?
It's a challenge for the reasons you've outlined. We are a small team doing a lot of work, and we're very busy, and we love taking on students, and we'd love to bring in more students. And actually, we have taken on students in the past that have then become employees, so we know the benefit of it.
Works, yeah.
But it requires a lot of time, I think, to give that student a really good experience. And it would be nice to try to find a way to work a bit more closely with academia, I think, to try and make that easier on both of us, maybe. But it wouldn't be a no, it's just how we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see a way, James, of delivering, of engaging with education on how to help these broad spectrum students to workforce?
Yeah, I think what Nick's talking about is the middle bit that we haven't quite engaged with just yet. So we already have got to the point where apprenticeships make sense for Kenza. So we're working on that for the production roles.
Okay.
And we work quite closely with the University of Exeter with their renewable degree over at Penryn campus.
Yes.
And have a number of them come to us into our R&D department fairly regularly, and as you said, had great success with them turning into employees thereafter.
Yeah.
But what Nick's talking about with the T-level sits in between those, and that's probably the next challenge for us, that we would want to get to the right size to be able to do right by ourselves and right by the student, because it's important that it works both ways.
Yeah. I mean, you both mentioned apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are, I think of apprenticeships when I exited school, it was very much more manual labour type of apprenticeships, where they'd be going to working on bricky or whatever it might be. But that's not the case anymore. Is you can be an apprentice in anything, can't you? And at any age.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, just rewinding on the last point a little bit.
Oh, please.
It's T-levels are one part of the solution potentially, but we're working currently at the moment on a program that will be based on a current extended diploma in engineering. So we're looking at a program that's level 3. It's equivalent to 1.5 A levels, and 1 year of technical training in college and work skills, getting ready for work skills and work placement. And then it will be a series of work placements throughout industry over the next following year. So not only students get ready for work, they get the work skills they need, they get the technical content to cover a broad range of different roles, and then they get exposure to a whole range of different roles and different work placements and different work with different employers. And the idea being, at the end of that 2-year period, they've not only got the skills, but they've also got a good idea of exactly what they want to go and do and who they want to go and work with afterwards. And that's some work we're doing with a number of employers at the moment, including the Eden Project, who are very keen to push that forward as a potential model. And that is, at the moment, our interim between what we're running at the moment and T-levels to some extent. The advantage is although we can still provide great work placements, we're not restricted by some of the current regulations that we'd have to meet under T-levels. So it's a halfway house. So still work to do. Regards to apprenticeships, apprenticeships are brilliant. They've been around for a very long time. They've changed regularly, and we've just gone through the last iteration of apprenticeships where they've increased in length for engineering in most cases. They've increased in complexity. They've increased in their rigour of assessment. Almost all of the apprenticeships that we run now are externally assessed. So a student will go through a programme, typically of 4 years. And at the end, they'll have an independent body come and assess their skills to say, yes, you are fit for work, you are ready, you can do the job. But generally what we're seeing from a lot of our level 3 learners, certainly in engineering, is a slow shift away from HE work, opportunities, and most of them are now preferring to take apprenticeships. I think apprenticeships offer an awful lot for young people. If you think about the cost associated with going to get a degree, it's pretty eye-watering. and not accessible for a lot of people. It's just not realistic. So we're doing two things on that. We're bringing a degree level programs closer to home, closer to Cornwall. When we're developing a lot of programs that are accessible by a lot more people more close to home, saving the cost of tuition fees elsewhere as well as living costs. And so that's going to be a large part of what we're doing going forward for our higher level work. And of course, the apprenticeships we're supporting with companies to make sure that they're fit for purpose. So lots of growth in both directions really, but students out all across Cornwall, in my department, they're loving their jobs and doing really well, and not only earning well, they've got already got the job. They haven't got to worry about getting the job after they've done the degree. They haven't got to worry about securing employment. They're already employed. They're getting paid while they're working. And we've seen a huge shift towards apprenticeships, which I think personally is fantastic. It's not right for everyone, and there are some job roles that a formal degree would be better. But I think we've got a group of people in Cornwall that are willing, ready, and interested in working. And that's a shortcut, the HE to some extent. You can still gain great qualifications up to BSc level through the IoT that we're running.
IoT?
Institute of Technology. So it's a group of colleges and providers across the southwest who are all working towards developing courses and skills that meet the local area's needs. So there's some really bright futures in that respect. I've always said, if you can get an apprenticeship and you're ready for work, then do it. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to university. There is an option that you can go in between there, but it's not for everyone.
How long are they, apprenticeships? You mentioned the engineering one is extended.
Yeah, so previously, about 3 years ago, we moved away from frameworks, and frameworks were roughly 2 years per level. And now we're at a point where the apprenticeship stands at level 3, and so there's no intermediate, it's just advanced only. And they'll typically be 4 years plus an endpoint assessment.
That's quite a commitment from a business to take on a 3 to 4 year apprentice, isn't it? I mean, is that a barrier?
I don't think so, because especially in a company like Benjamin that's growing and changing all the time, I think you'd quite like to take that apprentice for the journey, and they would develop as the company does, because we're constantly changing, it feels like. So I think actually that would be a really good thing, and they would evolve with us.
For us, not so much of a barrier.
Yeah, okay.
For a much smaller micro business, yes, I could see that being a challenge.
Yeah. Quite a commitment.
Quite a commitment.
But we, you get to a point with critical mass in a business where you kind of go, I need the growth, and I also need to participate in training.
I think on that with students as well, it is a real big commitment for them. They're committing to a route that at any point within that period, kind of you can step off, but not actually take an awful lot with you. It's under an old scheme, it was more progressive, and I think students could gain small chunks of learning and so on and move forward. So there is a risk there that in 4 years' time, if you think back what you were doing 4 years ago, it's a long period of time. Lives change, things happen, and what we have to do is make sure that that the company is right, that we won't work with companies who don't support people who haven't got the best interests of students at heart. That's just a non-starter. And secondly, they get the support on programme and commitment from the companies that they are going to help and support those students. It's not. I think apprenticeships have still got a bit of an image where someone's sweeping up and making the tea, and it's so far from the truth. It's unreal. But no, we look to work with employers who are committed to people. It's not cheap labour. It's a long-term commitment, but it's a long time. Personally, I'd like to see it reduced to 2 years and back to 2 different levels. So at least if someone has a life-changing event, or a big, something's happened, or they've just decided that actually they're changing direction, they can still leave with something halfway through, and that's not always possible.
Yeah, I would agree exactly with that. It's we mentioned earlier that there's no silver bullet in the renewable space, and it's moving quite fast. And so the path you start on today might not be the one that you want to end up by the time you get there. And to be able to change halfway would be great. And so it is quite a commitment in both regards.
We've had some students on programme as an apprentice and then move towards management during their apprenticeship.
Right.
Because it's companies grow so quickly, and they're adding huge value to the companies while they're working there. They're getting great skills at college, and they're applying those to the workplaces. and really helping them grow. So it's a long time, but it's great that they're having such a positive experience. But it's a challenge.
Yeah, two anecdotes there. So one of our previous apprentices is now our senior test engineer. So he's started through the apprenticeship route and is now testing all of our shiny new kit and making sure it works and does what it needs to, and driving the next wave of heat pump technology. So that's a success story there. And someone else we've hired is just finished his PhD with Rolls-Royce, having done that commitment.
Yeah.
And then actually aviation hasn't quite got the future that he thought it might when he started, and so he's been able to switch over to the renewable track.
What a difference 2 years makes in that particular game, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, on that note, could we gaze into the crystal ball, as misty and as difficult as it would be in renewables? We talk about 4 years and what were you doing 4 years ago. My goodness, 2 years. Would we ever have thought where we are now? Where do you think your industry is going? Go on, then. Whoever wants to answer on that one first.
I think one of the things that is becoming more and more important to us is the Internet of Things. So we integrate the Internet of Things into everything we do. So we'll have a gas processing plant on site, and we'll have somebody, then we'll have a mobile phone app that can, talk to that. We're missing skills actually in bridging the gap. So we've got engineers who can do the valves and the pumps and set all that up and know exactly if that valve doesn't open, this is going to happen. But the person doing the programming the app doesn't know what's going to happen if the valve doesn't open. So we need that. And I think that's going to be a big bit of growth for
learning.
Our company, is that Internet of Things, but pulling those two schools together so you've got a really well-rounded student who can do both those things. That'd be great.
What about you, James? Where do you see it going?
Where do we see it going? I hope in a few years' time I won't have to badly explain how a heat pump works, because you'll just get it and it'll.
I know what a heat pump is.
But yeah, we do see huge shift. We are very used to our cheap gas and our cheap gas boilers.
Yeah.
And in the future, that's unfortunately we're going to have to move away from that to something else.
Yes.
And we're working very hard to make that cost the same. That's what everyone wants us to do. And volume will help with that, and where we locate ourselves and how that fits together. But it is going to be quite a different system moving forwards. As I said, how do we get that synergy? How do you get that synergy between heating your home and using electricity and charging your car when the wind's blowing?
Yes.
En masse, because I might care about that because I'm that sort of type of person, but other people just want it to work. So how do we engineer the system such that works? And that is different skills. It's joining up lots of those things in a way that we've not done before.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting point on not just educating those that are installing it, but you mentioned when we spoke the other day that part of the barrier is a resistance to change again. Of those that install gas central heating, who are going to come to a lessening market, and they're kind of resisting wanting to install the new technologies. Is how we get over that. Who knows? But also training the householders, I think, in how to use a house differently,
or training ourselves and creating tech such that they don't need to.
Ideally,
which then requires.
Ideally, we don't want people to think. Well, how do we innovate to stop people thinking? No, I don't mean that. So, just as we come to an end of our time here, I just wondered if there was any myths that you'd like to dispel about your industry. Is there something that when you hear people go, "Oh no, that's not the case"? Have you got anything, Nick, to start with you this time, just to throw you in the deep end?
That's the thing. So, I'm not sure I have actually.
No,
I think I'm concerned about. We were going to be talking about transport later on. We'll save that for another time. But the notion that we can fix everything with one type of technology or one thing is going to solve our problems. It's just not the case, and that doesn't matter if it's energy, personal transport. I think we've got to be flexible. We've got to move forward with a view that actually things will be different. They sometimes won't be as easy, They may not be quite as cheap,
No.
but they are the solution that we've got. And I think that's really where we need to go.
Yeah, sometimes we've got to accept that we have to pay out of our pocket to avoid costing the earth, aren't we? Kate, what about your myth? Would you like to bust anything?
I think that there are good technical jobs in Cornwall. I studied engineering a long time ago now, and when I'm from Cornwall, and when I left university, I, to be honest, didn't even look at Cornwall for a technical job because I just assumed I wouldn't get one.
Oh.
And I worked out of county for a long time and came back and was just amazed at everything that's going on here. There is real opportunity down here, so I think we try and keep some homegrown talent. That would be really good.
Yeah, it helps us with the housing issues that we get when we bring people into the area as well.
I can add another one now. So you don't have to leave Cornwall to get a great opportunity and a great experience and a great education.
That's too late, Kate said it.
Do it here.
now.
No, it's good. I'm going to say that. I'm sorry.
Right.
But no, but it is the case that it was for a long time. You do have to leave, and then you can come back, maybe. And if you're an engineer, then chances are 40% of you ended up in the finance industry instead of engineering. Yeah. And it's all these issues that we've got. I think you don't have to go a long way to get a great experience.
Definitely.
Real. And what about you, James? Any myths you
myth
like
busting on heat pumps? We've got another hour?
Go on then. You've got 4 minutes.
Okay, all right. I'll keep it short. You can heat a home with a heat pump. Doesn't matter what the home is.
I can vouch for that. We got one, so I know
you can heat all homes with a heat pump.
All homes?
All homes, doesn't matter. We've just put one in at Trelliswick House.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Grade 1, listed, solid walled, single glazed,
Brilliant.
heated with a Kenza ground source heat pump.
Okay. Well, on that note, that killer note, I'm going to say thank you very much, James, Kate, Nick, for joining me on the Future Skills Show here. If you are a business struggling to find the right skills, or a person of any age wanting to investigate a new career and find the best education pathways, then go to the Truro and Penwith College website. It's at truro-penwith.ac.uk. I have to be careful each time I type that in. Feel free to connect with me, Russell Cosway, on LinkedIn. I'm the one labelled a kindness pirate, and mention the Future Skills Show. In the meantime, to our next show, which is on construction, I would like to see you there. Thank you for joining us.